A city is made up of people, and those people have two things that define the culture of the city. Those two things are beliefs and behaviors. In Stamford, the dominant belief in the city is antisocial, the idea other people are bad and they make the city worse. This belief leads to antisocial behaviors, including daily interactions between people in the community, but also the policies and laws that govern our city. I traveled through time from the future to transform Stamford from an antisocial community to a pro-social community, one where we see people as our greatest resource. This video details various pro-social policies on housing and infrastructure. Before I talk about the policies, I want to give everyone watching a framework for understanding why being pro-social is more than a preference, it's a necessity for Stamford. Why does Stamford need to be pro-social? Because
we live in a simulation.
seriously, there's growing evidence we live in a simulation. This may not sound relevant to local government policy, but the beliefs we have influence the behavior we do. The belief for why we're all here is relevant to the values we prioritize in our community. There's a decent chance the reason we're all here is because we're simulating ways to solve different problems in the real world. Here's how that works. In the present, the public has access to a rudimentary version of a technology called artificial intelligence. When I'm not running this campaign, my day job is integrating AI into small and medium-sized businesses in Fairfield County. I could talk for this whole video about the value of AI, but that's not why I'm bringing this up. AI products like ChatGPT can run basic simulations of reality. You can upload your medical history and prompt AI about wanting to lose weight, and the AI can run a simulation on how to accomplish your goal. Right now, the simulations run by AI models are text-based and fairly simple. In fact, you probably shouldn't even call them simulations. We're nowhere close to the 3D virtual realities you see in science fiction like Star Trek, but this technology is advancing as rapidly as it's getting adopted by the general public. The US federal government and major tech companies have invested more than $1 trillion in AI infrastructure, which is more money than the Manhattan Project and the Interstate Highway combined. Meanwhile, the public has adopted AI in their daily life. Hospitals use AI to detect cancer better than any human radiologist. Hearing aids use AI to instantly translate every language on Earth, and young people use AI to replace friends or romantic partners. There's a lot to be concerned about and a lot to be excited about. But the point is, this technology is very popular and will only get better from here. What our civilization has accomplished in the past 5 years should give people pause on what we might accomplish in the next 5 years. 5 years ago, if you predicted this year would have the technology I just described, people would have called you a crazy person. The fact we've accomplished so much in such a short amount of time should inspire people to consider what else they might be underestimating. It seems likely that within our lifetime, we will accomplish the fully immersive 3D virtual realities depicted in science fiction. If this technology did exist, it is obvious how it might be used. We would use it to solve the biggest problems in our existence. Imagine 1,000 different simulated realities, all trying to find the best solution for problems like cancer, poverty, natural disasters, and how to structure our society. In fact, we may unleash these simulations for both big problems and small problems. If we can run simulated realities, why not use them to expand our species' ability to create art, research, and innovation? We could be running simulations of the past 100 years to maximize our future potential by a magnitude measured in the billions. If we did do that, then that would mean there would be one true reality for every billions of simulated realities, which means the likelihood your existence was in the one true reality would literally be 1 in several billions. In other words, we almost certainly live in a simulation right now. Whether or not you believe in simulation theory doesn't really matter. What matters is you need to have a coherent understanding of why we exist in this world, and believing we're in a simulation to solve problems is as good as a belief as any to navigate what we should be doing in this world. Our world may be constructed through science, or it may be constructed by a divine creator, but whatever the context, we're all here to solve a problem. We don't know what problem we're solving, and we don't know who will have the solution. We also don't know if the problem is as big as an extinction event or as small as getting young people to make friends in town. What we do know is every person has the potential to solve a problem, and it's likely solving this problem is our purpose, both on this earth and in this city. Stamford has a lot of problems. We have a housing affordability crisis. We have dangerous and unfriendly infrastructure, and we have decades of debt we need to pay off. But our biggest problem is we have this attitude other people are the problem, as if we're Thanos from the Avengers, and the only solution is to wipe out half the galaxy. Because we think people only take what we have without providing anything on their own. People are not a problem. People are our greatest resource because they bring solutions to our problems. As mayor, I will prioritize a pro-social policy agenda to grow and expand our most valuable resource, people. Of course, people should meet the standards of our community. It doesn't make sense to support pro-social beliefs if we're not willing to punish antisocial behavior. I think this is something only conservatives can do effectively, and it's the topic of my next video. For now, I'll focus on my pro-social proposals. These proposals are divided across two main areas: housing and infrastructure. All of these proposals will make it easier for people to live here, travel here, and feel welcomed here. Let's start with housing. The problem with housing policy in Stamford is our city's financial position does not allow for a conservative housing policy. Stamford owes more than $100 million in fiscal obligations like pension debt and union benefits. And we haven't been keeping up with payments because of budgetary games played by Democrats for decades. The only solution to our budget problems is to grow. Every plot of land we don't develop means higher taxes for the families that already live here. We can't afford to have an antisocial housing policy, but Stamford's housing policy is explicitly antisocial. We value abandoned buildings and empty spaces more than places for people to live. There's no better example of this than a recent development in Glenbrook. Glenbrook had a parcel of land that had everything a resident might need. It was on an arterial road, a bike lane, and walking distance from a grocery store, a school, and a train station. It's difficult to imagine another property in the entire city that was better equipped to provide housing with minimal impact on our infrastructure. But here's what we did with it. That's right, it's a storage facility. It's actually a self-storage facility, so it didn't even add any jobs to Stamford. Our land use laws quite literally value the junk we don't want more than homes for people to live in. This policy is not only antisocial, it is financial suicide. My proposals will provide the growth Stamford needs to ensure the benefits of that growth go to homeowners who already live here. Housing policy number 1, enshrine property rights for property owners. Stamford has a paradoxical situation where you can be a property owner, but you need the government to give you permission to house your own family. For example, if you're an adult and discover your aging parents need daily medical assistance, you may want to move your 80-year-old mother into your own home. You want to give your mother some privacy, so you renovate your property into a duplex. To do this, you add a separate entrance and split the house into two, one side for your family and the other side for your aging mother. Adding a new entrance and installing some drywall is not a significant renovation. But in Stamford, it's illegal. It's illegal because the government, who does not own your property, has control over how you use what you own. The thing about this policy is it means property owners don't have property rights. If your property is only yours at the approval of government bureaucrats, then you don't actually own it. As mayor, I will propose a change to Stamford's zoning laws to allow single-family homes to convert to a duplex or triplex by right. You won't need a special approval, and you can't be blocked by neighborhood petition. Your property belongs to you. This policy not only allows property owners the ability to provide for their family, but it also gives Stamford a path to gradual growth. Instead of adding 100 new residents in a single building in a day, a neighborhood can grow gradually over time. This development strategy enables property owners to double or triple their property value while steadily increasing the housing options across the city. Housing policy number 2, all residential zones have a right to build a backyard cottage. In local politics, housing that appeals to lower-income residents tends to get abstracted into initialisms, like BMR or ADU. This alphabet of impersonal letters achieves the goal of devaluing the people who live there. This depersonalization of other people is so effective, people now associate these housing options as threats to a neighborhood. I understand the concern of adding a housing unit that dramatically increases the local population, but that's just not relevant to a backyard cottage, or as it's known in local policy, an ADU. A backyard cottage means residential property owners can benefit from Stamford's growth by choosing to rent out part of their property. This is distinct from large housing developments, which have financial incentives to fill the building as quickly as possible. Stamford technically allows for backyard cottages, but the rules for having one are so restrictive, it's essentially impossible to provide this type of housing. As mayor, I will deregulate the requirements for building an accessory dwelling unit in Stamford and make it possible to build one in all residential zones in the city. This policy will not only provide for more housing, but it will benefit current homeowners. A city's growth has a lot of intangible benefits for all residents, but deregulating backyard cottages will provide a tangible benefit for homeowners. If you're on a fixed income and feel the squeeze of rising property taxes, renting out a backyard cottage can give you the financial security you need as our city grows. Housing policy number 3, legalize starter homes and starter apartments. One of the reasons I registered as a Republican is because Democrats often let lofty ideas overtake practical solutions. In housing policy, you'll hear Democrats say housing is a right, and that right frequently comes packaged with luxuries like large square footage and a lot of amenities. Some Democrats seem to believe anything less than a subsidized luxury condo is a human rights violation. For example, in 2022, a viral video showed a woman who lived in a 120 square foot apartment. This apartment didn't have a window, air conditioning, laundry, or even an in-unit bathroom. But she said in an interview she could have lived in a luxury apartment, but chose not to, specifically because of the cost of housing. Here's a clip.
You were saying you lived in a high-rise before, right?
Luxury high-rise, yeah.
And you downsized to this.
Yeah.
What was the main point behind that?
I just felt stuck at my apartment. I had a gym there, I had everything there, and it was so expensive to the point where I didn't have a lot of extra free money to just go and do whatever, and I wanted to invest more.
I don't think Stamford should build tiny 100 square foot apartments with no windows, but part of the reason housing is so expensive in Stamford is because it's illegal to build lower cost housing. This is the direct result of a Democrat-dominated city intent on nannying every decision a person might make. People should have the option to build and live in lower cost housing, partly because we need that housing for our economy to function. If you've ever been to the 2.2 star rated Chipotle on High Ridge, you know a lot of businesses have difficulty finding workers. That's because the people who might work these jobs would live in the housing Stamford has made illegal. Every new apartment is luxury, and every new home is more than $1 million. Our housing policy is essentially selling the city to wealthy out-of-towners and pushing out the people who grew up here. As mayor, I will deregulate zoning laws such as minimum dwelling size, setbacks, lot coverage, and maximum unit per lot to lower housing costs in Stamford. If you're a college student or early in your career, you need lower cost housing to live here. Stamford needs to incentivize housing for every layer of our economy, not just luxury housing for the wealthy. Housing policy number 4, streamline the approval process. Stamford's land use approval process is ridiculous. While it makes sense to be skeptical of projects submitted by large developers, it doesn't make sense to subject our own residents to this same level of scrutiny. A lot of land use permits, like duplex conversions or backyard cottages, do not need to be manually approved by a department that's overworked and underfunded. More importantly, Stamford's permit process has been slow to adapt to the modern era. As recently as 2018, permit approvals in Stamford were done exclusively by paper. That meant you couldn't just email your documents. You had to go to the government center between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. on a weekday and physically hand in paper documents to receive an approval. The city has made advancements in digitizing this process, but it's not for all permits or project types. As mayor, I will bring Stamford's permitting process into the future. There's no reason permits for residential zones can't be possible through a 24/7 digital portal. Housing policy number 5, eliminate parking mandates for housing. By some metrics, Stamford spends more resources on parking for cars than it does housing for people.
10.
110?
That's literally a parking spot.
This isn't the result of the free market valuing parked cars more than living people. It's mandated by our government. For example, if you want to build a backyard cottage for your medically infirm mother who can't drive, You can only do that if you build a parking space for her too. These mandates are built on the assumption travel is only possible by car. There are certainly parts of Stamford that can only be accessed by car, but removing a mandate for parking doesn't remove the ability to build parking. It just means the government doesn't force you to do it. If a developer really wants to provide 3 parking spaces for every 1 housing unit in their building, they are free to spend their money doing that if they think it's a good idea. As mayor, I will eliminate all parking mandates for housing. Parking mandates bring us to our next doctrine of public policy: infrastructure. More and more, we're seeing people who choose to live a car-free lifestyle. Some people may not be making this choice because they don't want a car, but rather because they can't afford a car. But that distinction doesn't really matter. Stamford's mayor can't influence the global automobile market, but we can make our city more accessible to people without cars. We can provide travel options for all residents without pitting pedestrians in a war against people who own cars. There are internet communities that have a homicidal hatred for cars, and I want to be clear, these movements are just as antisocial as anything else I criticize. Stamford needs a pro-social vision for our infrastructure, and it begins by making this issue about families. Infrastructure policy number 1, family-friendly infrastructure. The topic of infrastructure can quickly feel elitist because a lot of the conversation is driven by technical experts. Traffic engineers and city planners have their own words like bioswale or strode that normal people don't understand. Additionally, local Republicans have been really weak on infrastructure issues, and as a result, this doctrine of expertise is dominated by Democrats. Infrastructure is one of the few areas where our community can find bipartisan solutions, but to do that, we need new language about these ideas that doesn't smuggle in divisive and irrelevant politics. As mayor, I will pursue an all-encompassing vision of family-friendly infrastructure. Family-friendly infrastructure means evaluating all infrastructure from the perspective of a typical family. Families include parents, kids, and grandparents. Each member of the family has different needs when they travel by foot, bike, public transit, or motor vehicle. Parents are the most capable travelers. Our infrastructure is designed around the healthy adult traveler, so unsurprisingly, it works for them, even if there is a heavy preference for motor vehicles. Kids are the least capable travelers because they can't use motor vehicles at all. Additionally, the parents of kids are pretty protective, so they may restrict their ability to use bikes or public transit out of safety concerns. This means kids and teenagers can really only get around by foot, and potentially by bike if we had protected bike lanes. Our current infrastructure is not designed for kids and teenagers, so unsurprisingly, you rarely see them around in public in Stamford. Grandparents are somewhere in between the rest of the family. A lot of grandparents have the same capabilities as adults, but a lot of them have increased health and safety concerns. You're simply not going to see grandma biking to Stop and Shop to pick up her groceries. Grandparents may be able to travel by foot, but they'll need protection from the elements like tree shading, wide sidewalks, or at the very least a bike lane to prevent bicyclists from riding on the sidewalk and colliding with the elderly. Finally, there's the whole family unit, which often travels together for things like holiday celebrations. There's simply no practical way to travel long distances with all members of the family in anything other than a car. The family unit is a reminder that as we make our city more friendly to other methods of travel, we still need it to be accessible by car. We need sidewalks, bike lanes, and roads to provide a way for each family member to get around safely. Family-friendly infrastructure is a positive vision for Stamford's infrastructure. Infrastructure policy number 2, prioritize sidewalks. Residents across Stamford, both downtown and further north, reliably say they want Stamford to be more walkable. Stamford's infrastructure investments have never prioritized sidewalks. In fact, funding for sidewalks is often cut from the budget season. This has largely been because Stamford's roads have been so bad that road repair takes priority over all other infrastructure. But our city's budget is an expression of our values. Sidewalks connect our neighborhoods and provide a method of travel for kids or teenagers. In fact, Stamford Public Schools don't even provide a bus stop for any families within walking distance of their school. But a lot of schools don't have sidewalks on these routes. For example, this is the field behind Stamford High School. Hundreds of kids access this back gate, but there's no sidewalk on the side of the road students actually use. As mayor, I will prioritize providing sidewalks within a square mile of all of our schools. If we want our youngest generation to go outside and touch some grass, they'll need a sidewalk to get there. Infrastructure policy number 3, connected bike lanes. For more than a decade, Stamford's Board of Representatives have resisted installing bike lanes in Stamford. As a result, all of our current bike lanes are not the result of a planned implementation, but rather our transportation department sneaking them in whenever they felt like they could get away with it. This is why Stamford's bike lanes seem to be placed randomly, with no connection between them. This has become the worst of both worlds. Bicyclists don't use our bike lanes because they're not practical or connected to anything, and they don't even move through any major population centers. Meanwhile, residents who don't like bike lanes say we shouldn't have more of them because the ones we do have don't get used, which is true because they're useless. As mayor, I will prioritize connecting a bike lane through to downtown and evaluate further expansion. Stamford could create a bike lane from Harbor Point to Bull's Head via Atlantic or Bedford Street and connect the largest population centers of the city with one bike lane. This would provide an opportunity to assess the value of Stamford's bike lanes before expanding the network further to other parts of the city. Infrastructure policy number 4, the Stamford knock. Not every behavior is a public policy. Some behavior is simply what people do. In Stamford, we have a really disturbing trend of antisocial behavior targeted at other travelers. For example, this is the crosswalk on Forest Street downtown, the most dangerous crosswalk in the entire city. The rules of the road give priority to pedestrians in this crosswalk. That's why we have 3 different signs indicating where cars need to stop. But a lot of motorists see the green light, get confused, and don't yield to any pedestrians. I can understand a motorist might get confused by mixed signals, but what's not acceptable is when their confusion turns to anger directed at other people. Countless times every month, a motorist will have a near miss with a pedestrian in a crosswalk and honk or verbally berate the pedestrian when the pedestrian didn't even do anything wrong. These instances of road rage happen all over the city, and we need to organize pushback on this antisocial behavior. As mayor, I will push back against antisocial road rage and lead by example with the Stamford knock. The Stamford knock is simply whenever a car is somewhere it shouldn't be, like a crosswalk, you communicate that error with a knock. The knock is not meant to antagonize a person or damage their property. It's an instantly recognizable sound that says, knock it off. Cars shouldn't be stopping in crosswalks or driving into pedestrians. People who do this are breaking the law. They are in the wrong no matter how loud they scream at other people. At the same time, I don't think it's worth it to dedicate police resources to minor traffic infractions. This is something the community can do with a little coordination and commitment. As mayor, I promise to lead that movement. Infrastructure policy number 5, prioritize infrastructure over cameras. This crosswalk at Forest Street is so dangerous because its design is confusing. You have different signs saying stop, but a light that says go. In some parts of the city, we have wide roads that encourage people to drive fast, but speed limits telling them to drive slow. These mixed signals are confusing, and we have a responsibility to fix this problem rather than punish people for the failures of our infrastructure. In Stamford, there is a movement to increase safety by implementing cameras that automatically ticket people who violate the rules of the road. But I think this is a bad idea. I don't like the idea of taking the human being out of law enforcement. Handing off the ability to fine people to a robot is not a path of public policy that leads anywhere good. More importantly, I believe most behavior is because of the infrastructure's design. A wide road will always result in faster speeds. If you want people to drive slower, then narrow the road. As mayor, I will oppose efforts to automate traffic enforcement and instead champion infrastructure projects to increase safety. Infrastructure policy number 6, close Bedford Street. Since the pandemic, the city of Stamford has transformed Bedford Street every year to become more of a community space. Every summer, on-street parking is replaced with outdoor dining, and both businesses and patrons really love this seasonal change. A recent poll of Stamford residents found an overwhelming number of respondents would support closing Bedford Street to make it pedestrian only. As mayor, I would listen to the public and permanently close Bedford Street to motor vehicle traffic as soon as summer 2026. Bedford Street has a lot of potential to be our marquee community space, but I do think it needs to maintain a single lane of the road that would be accessible by bicycles and buses. Buses would be able to access this road by lowering bollards that could be placed at Broad Street. This would ensure existing public transit could still function while decreasing overall motor vehicle traffic by almost 100%. Closing Bedford Street early in my administration could act as the reminder to the public that we can accomplish big projects quickly. That's why for this video, I'm asking you to sign my petition to close Bedford Street. This is an issue supported by the public, and I know the transportation department is interested in doing it. It's possible we could get this done before before the election, simply through consistent advocacy. This could be the jumping off point for all other bigger projects in the future. Stamford needs more walkable areas with community spaces, like Bedford Street. Originally, this video was going to cover my proposals for how to incentivize community spaces, but those spaces need to be protected. Our current culture is sometimes squeamish about trusting law enforcement to protect the public from antisocial behavior. And for what it's worth, the public also partakes in antisocial behavior that reinforces people's fear of going out in public. My next and final video is about how conservatism has the answer to many of these problems. Stamford's Republican Party needs to be clear. Its main priority is to protect the community from antisocial beliefs and behaviors. That starts with adopting pro-social policies on housing and infrastructure, but it relies on defending conservative values. If you want to know more about my campaign or get notified when I have new videos, events, or volunteer opportunities, visit my website at www.thefutureisbrighter.com. Until next time, stay strong, Stamford. The future is brighter. I'm Arthur Augustin, and I approve this message.